Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling birthright citizenship in the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
And, this has been in the news again because former President Trump has said he
Yeah.
wants to end it.
Yeah,
So this has obviously generated
of course.
quite a bit of discussion,
Big debate.
big debate online.
Absolutely.
And we've got a fascinating Reddit thread that we're going to be
Uh-huh.
looking at that's packed with all kinds of opinions and anxieties.
Awesome.
Regardless.
Yeah, I think one of the most striking things about this is just how diverse
Yeah,
the reactions are.
it's quite a mix.
There are people having these in-depth legal debates.
Right.
There are people predicting, societal collapse.
Yeah.
And then there are people just kind of making jokes about the whole thing.
Yeah, it's the whole spectrum. But
Right.
before we kind of get into the emotional roller coaster of this Reddit thread,
Sure.
can you just give us like a quick birthright citizenship 101? What is it?
Absolutely.
What's the legal basis for it?
So birthright citizenship basically means that if you are born on U.S. soil,
Okay.
you are automatically a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
It doesn't matter
It doesn't matter.
if your parents are tourists, students,
Right.
undocumented immigrants,
Oh.
even diplomats. You're born here. You're a citizen.
Okay.
And this is rooted in the 14th Amendment
Ah.
to the Constitution,
All right. So the 14th Amendment.
which was adopted in 1868,
Okay.
just after the Civil War.
So the 14th Amendment's at the heart of this debate.
It is.
So can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah.
What was its original purpose?
Sure.
How does it connect to birthright citizenship?
So the 14th Amendment was primarily intended to address the citizenship status of formerly enslaved people,
Okay.
guaranteeing them
Yeah.
full and equal citizenship rights.
Okay.
And the amendment's first section states that
Okay.
all persons born or naturalized in the United States
Okay.
and subject to the jurisdiction thereof
Subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside.
So that is the phrase
That is the phrase.
that keeps popping up.
Yes.
And I'm guessing that is where the debate gets tricky.
That is exactly where the debate gets tricky.
Okay, so at the time it was drafted, it was more about
Yes.
Black Americans who had been born in the U.S.
Right.
It wasn't about children of immigrants.
That's right. It was about ensuring the citizenship of Black Americans born in the U.S. It wasn't necessarily focused on the children of immigrants.
Okay, but over time, that broad language has been interpreted to mean
Right.
anyone born here, regardless of their parents' immigration status.
Exactly.
So that's been the norm for over a century. But it seems
Oh.
like that's being challenged now.
It is, especially with this whole debate reignited by Trump's statement.
With Trump's statement.
Mhm.
And so there's this renewed push to kind of re-examine what
Yeah.
subject to the jurisdiction thereof really means.
Exact.
And I'm seeing that argument playing out in the Reddit thread too.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of back and forth about what jurisdiction really means
Yeah.
in this context.
It can be a little confusing.
So can you maybe shed some light on that?
Sure.
What are the different interpretations?
Well, so the traditional view is
Okay.
that anyone born on U.S. soil
Okay.
is inherently subject to U.S. laws
Okay.
and therefore entitled to birthright citizenship.
Okay.
It's about the place of birth.
Right. So even if your parents haven't gone through the legal immigration process,
That's right.
you're born here, you're automatically a citizen.
Correct.
But it sounds like there are dissenting voices
There are.
arguing that subject to the jurisdiction thereof implies something more.
Yes. They're saying it's not just about physical presence, but about a deeper level of allegiance and adherence to U.S. laws.
Okay.
And they point to examples like Native Americans on reservations.
Okay.
Initially, they were not considered fully subject to U.S. jurisdiction,
Oh.
and therefore were not granted automatic citizenship at birth.
So there's essentially saying that there has always been exceptions to birthright citizenship
That's right.
based on the concept of jurisdiction.
Exactly.
And children of diplomats.
Yes, children born to diplomats on U.S. soil, they don't automatically become citizens
Right.
because their parents have diplomatic immunity and are not fully under U.S. jurisdiction.
So they're using these historical precedents to argue that jurisdiction is not a simple yes or no question.
Exactly.
It involves like a deeper assessment
Right.
of an individual's relationship to U.S. law.
Precisely.
Okay, so they're arguing undocumented immigrants,
Yes.
by their very nature, are not complying with U.S. immigration laws.
Correct.
And therefore, their children should not be automatically granted citizenship.
That's their argument.
Okay, but that argument is contested.
Very much so.
So it's interesting how these historical examples, they add layers of complexity
I do.
to what initially seems like a straightforward concept.
For sure.
So those who are opposing this they're also pointing to some specific Supreme Court rulings
Yes, they are.
that kind of back up their point of view.
Yeah, they highlight certain Supreme Court rulings that, while upholding birthright citizenship, emphasize the concept of allegiance. They claim these rulings suggest that being subject to the jurisdiction implies a level of submission to U.S. law that goes beyond mere physical presence.
Okay, so they're looking at the nuances of those rulings.
They are.
To make that argument, the jurisdiction is not just about being on U.S. soil.
Right. It's about a deeper legal and political connection to the U.S.
But that's a pretty bold legal claim
That is?
to reinterpret
Yeah.
a constitutional amendment that has been the basis for citizenship for over a century.
It is. And it's important to note that this perspective is not the prevailing legal opinion.
right.
Numerous legal scholars and Supreme Court rulings have affirmed birthright citizenship for children of immigrants, regardless of their legal status, based on the traditional understanding of the 14th Amendment.
Okay, so we have this fascinating legal tug of war.
Yes.
On one side, the traditional view rooted in
Just solely.
solely, and a broad interpretation of the 14th Amendment.
Correct.
And on the other side, a challenge based on a narrower interpretation of subject to the jurisdiction thereof,
Right.
citing historical exceptions
Yeah.
and specific legal precedents.
Exactly. And it's this very tension, this legal and historical debate that makes this issue so compelling. It's not just about technicalities. It delves into the very essence of American identity, who belongs, and how we define citizenship in a changing world.
So we've got the historical and legal context.
You do?
Now let's dive into the real-world drama of this.
Okay.
Let's look at what former President Trump actually proposed and how people are reacting,
All right. Sounds good.
especially in this heated Reddit thread.
Let's do it. It's crucial to understand how these abstract legal arguments translate into real-world anxieties, hopes, and fears.
So Trump made some bold statements about ending birthright citizenship.
Yes, he did.
What was his proposed plan, and how feasible was it from a legal standpoint?
Well, Trump proposed ending birthright citizenship via executive order. He believed he had the power to unilaterally redefine subject to the jurisdiction thereof without going through the lengthy process of amending the Constitution.
So even with all his talk about executive orders,
Right.
Trump couldn't actually have pulled this off.
Not likely. However, this approach faced immediate pushback from legal experts who argued that a president simply doesn't have that power.
Okay, so it wasn't as simple as signing a piece of paper.
It would have been much more complicated than that.
And boom, no more birthright citizenship.
Definitely not. The power to amend the Constitution lies with Congress and the states, not the president alone. Any attempt to overturn such a fundamental aspect of citizenship law would almost certainly end up in the Supreme Court, which would ultimately decide its constitutionality.
Okay, but even though his plan was legally questionable,
Right.
the mere suggestion of ending birthright citizenship
Yeah.
triggered
Wait.
intense reactions,
Absolutely.
especially online.
Of course.
This Reddit thread we're looking at is a prime example.
Yeah.
What kind of emotional responses are you seeing?
Oh, a very wide range.
Okay.
I mean, you have people quoting the 14th Amendment verbatim, asserting it as a clear-cut defense of birthright citizenship.
Okay.
You have others who are expressing genuine fear, almost like a premonition of a fascist takeover or the erosion of democratic norms.
Yeah, I'm seeing comments about people being worried about the future, about their families,
Yes.
about the very definition of American being rewritten.
It's understandable. This debate touches on deeply held beliefs about belonging, fairness, and what it means to be a part of this nation. It's no surprise that people are reacting with such strong emotions.
Okay, so we've got this legal battleground,
Yes.
emotional roller coaster,
Yeah.
and this fundamental question of national identity all swirling around.
It's hot.
Before we jump into the nitty-gritty of the Reddit thread,
Okay.
can we zoom out for a moment? How does the U.S. approach to birthright citizenship
Yeah,
compare to other countries?
that's a great question. The U.S. is actually one of relatively few developed nations that still practices unrestricted birthright citizenship.
Oh, so the U.S. is kind of an outlier in this regard.
In a way, yes. Many European countries, for example, have moved away from this model, adopting more restrictive approaches. They often require at least one parent to be a citizen or legal resident for a child born in their territory to gain citizenship.
So the U.S. is kind of holding on.
While birthright citizenship is deeply ingrained in American history and legal tradition, it's not as universal a concept as some might assume.
To this older way of doing it?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
It adds a whole new layer
Yes.
to this debate.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about internal U.S. politics.
Right.
We're talking about a global context.
Right. Exactly. Understanding this broader context helps us see the U.S. debate not as an isolated phenomenon, but as part of a global conversation about citizenship, immigration, and national identity in an increasingly interconnected world.
Okay, well, it seems like this deep dive is just getting started.
It is.
We've got the historical foundation,
Uh-huh.
the legal complexities,
Yeah.
the emotional weight,
For sure.
and now even a global perspective.
A lot to cover.
So let's take a closer look at that Reddit thread
All right.
and see how these themes are playing out
Right.
in the real world, in the minds and hearts of
Yeah.
everyday Americans.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's unpack some of these specific concerns or
Awesome.
arguments that are coming up
Right.
in this Reddit thread.
All right.
And I think one of the most common points of contention
Yes.
is that phrase we keep coming back to,
Okay.
subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Yeah.
It seems like people are really kind of
It's vague.
grappling with what that means,
It is.
both legally and in terms of how it shapes our understanding
Well,
of American identity.
It's a phrase that's loaded with meaning.
Yeah.
And open to interpretation, as we've said.
Right.
And it's fascinating to see how people are kind of trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a mix
Yeah.
of like legal analysis and raw emotion
Right.
in this thread.
Oh, for sure.
Some people are like dissecting court cases
Yeah.
and legal definitions, and
Yes.
other people are expressing these deep fears.
Yeah, and you can't really separate those two things either.
Right.
Because this isn't just like a theoretical legal debate.
Yeah.
It has real implications for
Yeah.
people.
We were.
And it really taps into those anxieties about national identity and where the country is headed.
For example, one user brings up the idea of sovereign citizens.
Okay.
These are the folks who believe they're not subject to U.S. law at all.
Right.
And they're worried that if birthright citizenship is redefined
Mm-hmm.
based on a stricter interpretation of jurisdiction,
Mm-hmm.
it could give these fringe groups
Right.
more ammunition
Yeah.
to challenge the legitimacy of the government.
That's definitely a valid concern.
Yeah.
I mean, any attempt to reinterpret a constitutional amendment has the potential to create unintended consequences.
Right.
You have to be really careful
Right.
about the ripple effects.
Especially when you're dealing with something
Especially with something like this.
as fundamental
Yeah.
as citizenship.
Absolutely.
And it seems like a lot of people are also drawing parallels
Yeah.
to other historical moments
Yeah.
when the rights of certain groups were
Right.
questioned
Yeah.
or denied.
Of course.
And there's a sense of, here we go again.
It's understandable.
Like, this debate is echoing past injustices
Yeah.
and raising fears about what the future might hold.
The history of citizenship in the U.S. is intertwined with issues of race, discrimination, and the struggle for equality.
Yeah. One user even compares the situation
Okay.
to the lead up to World War II,
Wow.
with the U.S. potentially becoming an authoritarian state
Okay.
where dissent is silenced
Uh-huh.
and the Constitution is rendered meaningless.
That's pretty extreme.
I mean, it's a pretty bleak outlook,
Yeah.
but it speaks to the level of anxiety that some people
Right.
are feeling.
Yeah. It's important to acknowledge those fears, even if they seem extreme.
Right.
I think they reflect a genuine sense of unease.
Yeah, and it's not just abstract fears either.
No, it's not just theoretical.
There are real concerns about how ending birthright citizenship
Right.
would impact families
Yeah.
and communities.
No.
One user talks about their coworker in California
Okay.
who's terrified of being targeted
Yeah.
and potentially deported
It makes sense.
if birthright citizenship is revoked.
Yeah, I think those are the human stories that often get lost in the political back and forth.
Right.
It's a reminder that we're not just talking about legal principles.
Right. It's heartbreaking to think about the families that could be torn apart
Absolutely.
and the futures that could be upended.
Yeah, and you have to think about the potential for increased discrimination
Right.
and social unrest.
Yeah.
If you create a system where people's citizenship status is constantly being questioned or scrutinized
Right.
based on how they look
Yeah, it's not hard to imagine
or background.
a scenario where racial profiling becomes even more prevalent,
Exactly.
with law enforcement having more power to stop and question people about their citizenship.
It could create a real climate of fear and suspicion, and it would further divide communities.
And beyond the social and moral implications, there are also enormous logistical challenges.
Oh, absolutely.
How would the government even go about identifying?
Yeah, that's a great point.
And potentially deporting people who were born here, but suddenly deemed non-citizens.
It would be incredibly complex and costly. Probably requiring things like DNA testing. And extensive record keeping.
I mean, it would be a bureaucratic nightmare. Not to mention the potential for errors and abuse.
And what about the economic impact?
Oh, that's huge.
Deporting millions of people who are contributing to the economy, even if they're undocumented, would have significant consequences.
Absolutely. The economic ripple effects would be massive, impacting businesses, industries, and entire communities that rely on the labor and contributions of immigrants, regardless of their legal status.
The more we dig into this, the more complicated it gets. There's a web of legal arguments, historical precedents, emotional anxieties,
all connected,
practical concerns.
It's complicated.
Let's try to step back and look at the bigger picture.
Right.
What does this debate about birthright citizenship really reveal about America in the 21st century?
I think at its core, this debate reflects a deep-seated anxiety about national identity and belonging in a rapidly changing world.
It's about who gets to be considered American, who has a claim to this land and its resources, and what it means to be a part of this national story.
And we're seeing these anxieties play out, not just in the birthright citizenship debate.
Of course not.
But in other areas as well.
Yeah, immigration, identity politics, the rise of nationalism. It's like the very definition of American is being renegotiated.
How we answer these questions,
it's a big deal,
will shape the future of the country for generations to come.
Absolutely.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
But I think this deep dive has been really valuable in highlighting the complexity,
some nuances
of this debate.
We've explored the legal arguments, the emotional responses, the global context, and the potential consequences of ending birthright citizenship.
And it really all boils down to that one phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
And we've seen how this seemingly simple phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, can spark intense debate and reveal deep divisions within American society.
So what I'm hearing is there are no easy answers here.
No easy answers.
But this debate ultimately boils down to fundamental questions about fairness, belonging, and the kind of nation we want to be.
It's about values, about who we include and who we exclude, and about the future of American identity in an increasingly diverse and interconnected world.
Okay, so having explored all these different facets of the debate, I think it's time to shift our focus to potential solutions.
Yeah, let's do that.
If birthright citizenship were to be abolished, what alternative pathways to citizenship should be considered? How can we create a more just and equitable immigration system?
That's the big question.
That reflects our values as a nation.
That's the crucial question we need to grapple with. Simply eliminating birthright citizenship without offering viable alternatives would be short-sighted and would likely create more problems than it solves. We need to think critically and creatively about how to create a system that is both fair and workable.
All right, let's delve into that in the final part of our deep dive. All right, so we've really kind of dug deep into all the different facets of this birthright citizenship debate. The historical roots, the legal arguments,
the emotional weight,
the
potential fallout.
But it feels like we're at a crossroads now.
Yeah, I think so.
If birthright citizenship were to be abolished, what are the alternatives?
What are the options?
What kind of pathways to citizenship could we consider that would be fair?
That's the big question, right? And it's a question that demands thoughtful consideration, not knee-jerk reactions. We need to move beyond the rhetoric and really grapple with the practicalities and the ethical implications of any proposed changes.
It feels like a lot of the debate so far has focused on what we don't want, ending birthright citizenship, without offering any viable alternative.
It's like slamming a door shut without opening any new ones. People will still seek a better life, families will still be formed, And children will still be born.
People are still going to come here.
Right.
Families will still be formed.
Yeah.
Children will still be born.
Exactly.
So what options do we have?
Well, we can look at what other countries are doing.
Okay.
Many European countries, as we've said, have moved away from unrestricted birthright citizenship.
Right.
They've adopted systems where if you're born there,
yeah,
at least one of your parents has to be a citizen.
Okay.
Or a legal resident for you to get citizenship.
Okay.
So it's a kind of hybrid model.
That balances just solely the right of the soil with the legal status of the parents.
So it's not an all or nothing approach. It's saying that there are different ways to define belonging.
Right.
And that,
And we can find a middle ground that considers both the rights of the child and the importance of maintaining a legal immigration system.
We can find some kind of middle ground.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one option.
Right.
What are some other pathways?
Well, another big one is the idea of a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants.
Okay.
So this could involve offering a process for eligible individuals to gain legal status.
Okay.
And eventually apply for citizenship.
So not a blanket amnesty.
Right.
But a structured...
It wouldn't be a blanket amnesty, but a structured process with clear requirements.
With clear requirements.
For instance, individuals might need to demonstrate a history of paying taxes, learning English, and passing a background check. So it's not about giving a free pass.
Right.
It's about creating a fair and realistic path.
It's about acknowledging that undocumented immigrants are already part of the fabric of American life and offering them a chance to fully participate in the legal and political system.
For people who are already here.
Yeah.
Who are already integrated into American society.
And who are contributing members of their communities.
Contributing members.
Right.
But wouldn't that be seen as rewarding people?
Well, that's one of the arguments against it.
All right.
The people who broke the law by entering the country illegally.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that the issue of undocumented immigration is incredibly complex.
Right.
I mean, many people came here seeking a better life.
Yeah.
Fleeing violence or poverty.
Right.
And they may not have had access to legal pathways to enter the country.
Right.
Others may have overstayed visas or had their legal status changed due to circumstances beyond their control.
So these are not just...
These are real people.
Abstract legal categories.
With families, jobs, and dreams.
Yeah.
And simply labeling them as lawbreakers doesn't address the underlying complexities of the situation.
These are real people.
Right.
With real lives.
Yeah.
And a pathway to citizenship wouldn't be about condoning past actions.
Right.
It'd be about...
It's about finding a pragmatic and humane way to move forward as a nation.
Finding a way to move forward as a nation.
Right.
What I'm hearing is that there are options.
There are.
We don't have
to a lot black and white.
Settle for an all-or-nothing approach.
We can explore different models, weigh the pros and cons, and try to find a path that reflects our values as a nation.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
It is.
To emphasize that there are options.
Yeah.
We can explore different models.
Right.
We can weigh the pros and cons and try to find a path that reflects our values as a nation.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to have these conversations.
Right.
To engage in thoughtful debate and to be open to different perspectives.
Right.
I mean, the future of citizenship in America isn't a foregone conclusion.
Right.
It's something that we shape collectively through our engagement, our advocacy, and our willingness to listen to each other.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I've learned a lot.
Yeah, me too.
And, I think it's clear that this birthright citizenship debate is just one piece of a much larger conversation.
It's a big puzzle.
About immigration, national identity.
And the future of American society.
The future of American society.
Right.
So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
For this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all of you listening out there.
Yeah.
Keep learning, stay curious.
Stay engaged.
And let's continue this important conversation.
Absolutely.
Because the future of America depends on all of us.